You bet.
Now I'd like to bring in my colleague, senior congressional correspondent Chad Pergram. Chad, your reaction to this earthquake in American politics, and what are you picking up from top lawmakers on the Hill?
Well, I was told the morning after the debate by a senior House Democratic source, and the quote was, "This was unsustainable." And they thought that the president had not been served very well by people around him and just didn't think that this was going to last very much longer, depending on how long you look here. I think it is significant that the president now has just endorsed Vice President Harris, because there are a lot of people on Capitol Hill, especially the Congressional Black Caucus, who will be okay with that. To have some sort of wide open process or something like that was going to be extremely messy. This is messy enough as it is. People kept talking about the concept of having a brokered convention. I pointed out to people that it wouldn't necessarily be a brokered convention, but it would be a convention. The idea that, these delegates, these people who have voted for President Biden and Harris in the primaries here, those delegates are pledged to them, but not bound to them until they have that roll call vote. Supposed to be an electronic roll call vote in early August. That'll probably change in some form now, depending on what happens, or some people will probably push for the convention. The other thing that I noticed here is that very quickly we were starting to get statements, Mike, from vulnerable Democrats. Kim Schreier, who's a Democrat from Washington State, Tammy Baldwin, who's a Democratic senator in Wisconsin. That's a battleground state there, and immediately endorsing what President Biden has done here, because, things were not going to look good for people who represent districts in states like that down ballot. Now you have what's going on the Republican side of the aisle, and this is really significant here, where you're starting to have people like Elise Stefanik, the Republican conference chair, Richard Hudson, the chair of the NRCC from North Carolina. Immediately, and we knew that this was going to happen, they're starting to say, look, if the president cannot run for re-election, then he ought to step down. How is he fit to serve?
Right.
And, we're going to have inquiries this week, Mike, into the shooting of former President Trump. There might be inquiries into this as to what the health of the president might be.
Chad, I covered former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi day in and day out with you for a decade. You've covered her for several decades. What about her role in terms of trying to convince President Biden it was time for a change and basically trying to protect her Democratic members?
Yeah, that was something that she was really worried about. And it was obvious, just not from Pelosi, but others who had a hand in this, that they had to address what was going to happen down ballot. And the idea was to start with a gentle push, and then it started to be more of a wave, and then it started to be a tidal wave, and then it was getting to maybe a tsunami. In fact, I think that we were probably going to have some of this last week had it not been for the shooting a week ago. It was a week ago Saturday that Chuck Schumer went to Rehoboth, did not announce this, and met with President Biden. And that statement, that just the fact that he had met, it came out seconds before the shooting. And so any conversation about this was kind of put off for about a week. And we've just gotten a statement here, Mike, from the majority leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer. He says Joe Biden has not only been a great president and a great legislative leader, but a truly amazing human being. Joe, today shows you are a great patriot and a great American. And, Democrats just saw no upside. And again, this was the amazing thing for weeks now on Capitol Hill since that debate. There was that meeting over at the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee a week ago Thursday, where all the Democrats I talked to, nobody really wanted to say much. And they were saying, well, it's his decision and things like this. But we didn't get the sense from anybody that they were, I shouldn't say anybody, but very, very few, that they were really full bore behind Joe Biden, or they were doing it with a caveat. And that's where 2 weeks ago we had this conference call among House Democrats where many of them were starting to say very frank things and throw him under the bus and say, in the words of Don Beyer, he was feeble and they liked him, but he couldn't put two sentences together. Information from that leaked out, and then members had to dial it back because it was obvious this wasn't going as quickly as they thought it could go, Mike.
Chad, understandably, there's intense focus on the race for the White House, but the building you covered day in and day out, a third of the Senate is up for re-election with a tough map for Democrats, and the entire House of Representatives is on the ballot. So what about the balance of power? If we're looking at former President Trump returning to the White House, potentially, we'll see what the voters decide. But what about perhaps the argument from senior Democrats, which I've heard about being a check on a Trump presidency? What about that?
Yeah, that's something that they were very concerned about, losing, all three, the House, the Senate, and the White House. Holding the Senate is a tough battle to start with. That's going to be very challenging for the Democrats, no matter what. And that's why you had people like Sherrod Brown and John Tester coming out. Brown just Friday, but Tester a little bit earlier, saying, look, it's time for you to step aside, Mr. President. The House, they always thought that was within range, certainly because it was a narrow majority, but also because you had, they didn't think that the Republicans in the House were in utter turmoil at times. So they had trouble passing defense bills. They burned through 2 speakers, couldn't elect multiple people as speaker, trying all sorts of resolutions all the time. Democrats would always point to the loudest people in the room, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. You get the idea here. And so they're like, if we can't beat that, then, we're not doing anything right at all. And so that's where I think that this was kind of a salvaging process here. Now, does this salvage things? That's the question that people just don't know. Does it help? And, keep in mind that Democrats have been tarred by this for a while now, that you've had Republicans. I remember this early on when they started to talk about the border crisis. They said, they had appointed Vice President Harris as the border czar, and they had criticized and they had developed a library of information against her, saying she's not doing very good with the border. That is one of the primary 4 to 5 issues on the ballot this fall. And if Republicans can turn that around and say, well, you thought it was bad with Biden, it's really not going to be much better with the border czar, Vice President Harris. That's something that Democrats, are very vulnerable on. Republicans can use against them. And one other thing that's going to be very, very important here, Mike, is who is she going to pick if she's in fact the one as her running mate? Is it going to be a moderate? Is it going to be somebody like Andy Beshear? Someone had put to me earlier today, maybe someone like Tim Ryan, the former congressman who lost to J.D. Vance from Northeast Ohio, and would match up very well with him on the stage there. Is that where maybe this is where maybe House and Senate Democrats weigh in more if the torch is in fact passed, fairly seamlessly to Vice President Harris? And I'm not saying that that's going to, be a done deal either here. That's something to look for if they have more of a say in who that person is. Is it Gretchen Whitmer? Do they want somebody from the Midwest? If it's going to be a woman, do they have to have a man? Do they want to have 2 minorities on the ticket? There's a million different ways to spin this right now.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.